I have a special treat for you. The person that I'm going to be interviewing invited me on to his podcast. And I was on the podcast with him, and he was asking some questions about how I sold my company, and he was sharing some of his path as an entrepreneur. And then afterward, he called me up and said that he was in the midst of an acquisition and asked if I would advise him in the transaction. Generally with the private client program, it's a year-long program and it's spread out where you meet, say, monthly, or in the case of the level 4 private client program, we might meet every couple times a month or once a week. Anthony said, I need as much of your time upfront as possible to help get this acquisition done. And so we were meeting all the time. He would send me audio files of his negotiations to listen to and get perspective on. And I would listen to it and I'd turn over my perspective, and then he'd go back and negotiate. And we worked hand in hand on this exit. And it was such a remarkable opportunity for me because it had been a while since I'd been involved in an active exit. Of course, I'd had some of my own, but now all of a sudden I'm advising Anthony and his, and I'm sharing with him the best practices and the things to avoid and the risks that I had engaged in and some of the things that he should be looking out for during the acquisition. The acquisition concluded and it was remarkable, and he'll talk about that. And then we start talking about life after acquisition, which is quite an adventure. And in fact, I don't think he understood what he was getting into after the acquisition. And it's a thing that all of us hope to one day have a massive exit. And you got to be careful what you hope for, because it comes with a whole lot of growth and a whole lot of changes and a new identity, and all kinds of things change after a big acquisition that Anthony will dive deeper. He is an expert in marketing. He's a super expert in it when it comes to paid media, Facebook advertising, YouTube advertising, lead generation. Utilizing paid media to build and scale your business is something that he has phenomenal expertise in. Prior to his last company that he sold in a very large exit, he ran an agency in advertising. So he's worked with a number of different brands and a number of different clients on the subject of paid media advertising and helping them scale the revenue side of their business. And then of course, he was a very solid operator. The company that he had created was highly profitable, had a small team, and got bought at a pretty large multiple, certainly a larger multiple for his industry than most acquisitions that occur. And it was acquired by a publicly traded company. And so that's very significant because it shows you the quality of a business that he built. Rarely will a publicly traded company buy a business that isn't buttoned up and run very well. And so to get acquired by a publicly traded company is a big deal. He's also been a platinum member with Tony Robbins, and he's very active in personal, professional, and spiritual growth. He runs triathlons and marathons. I don't know if he does marathons. I know he does triathlons, and extreme athlete. Those are just some of the attributes of Anthony that I love so much. After his exit, we just became very close. We've kept in touch. He invested in AlterCall, so technically he's an investor, and he joins us here tonight to share his wisdom and information. I'll ask some questions, and then we'll turn it over to you to ask questions too. So please feel free to write down some questions that might come up for Anthony, and we'll try to take some time after I do a quick interview with him to get some of your questions answered too. And I'm excited to bring Anthony Sarandrea to you. So Anthony, hello, sir.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me on. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. This will be fun.
Did everything that I say add up, or is there anything that you need to correct for the record?
No, you nailed it.
Okay.
Pretty dead on, brother.
Yeah, just making sure, sometimes people introduce me and I'm like, I'm not a billionaire yet, so I'm glad I didn't take any liberties. So why don't you share a little bit about your experience as an entrepreneur?
Hi, everyone, again. I'm super excited to be here. I guess in 2 minutes, I was going door to door selling solar hot water systems in the Arizona heat, which was a blast of its own. And I took a lunch break at a gym, and I had always, well, let me back up a little bit, excuse me. My dad was a retired NYPD cop. My mom worked in my elementary school, and they made an outstanding, unbelievable investment in me and my 3 brothers for us to go to private Catholic education. And I'll forever be able to thank them for that investment, not just because I got to grow and learn along, really a high level of education, but also my spirituality. I get to practice it for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And I know everyone on this call shares that. And it's just, I'm so blessed for that. So I can never thank them enough for that. So flash forward, I see a guy playing basketball on a Tuesday, midday. And I said, what the heck do you do that you can do this? And he goes, I work on the internet. And Man, you can tell I got a lot of energy. So I like being around, talking to people outside, sitting in front of a computer for 10 hours a day. Sounded like the absolute worst possible career choice to me, but I love the idea of playing basketball midday. So I asked him, begged him if I could work for him for free. And that's where I learned the value of someone's time, because at first he said no. And I said, how could you say no to free labor? I don't get it. So I really got to learn the value of someone's time. So ended up begging him enough to where I got to work for him, and I really got to learn how online marketing works. So how to deploy media online. So I saw, $100,000 a day Google AdWords budgets as an example for Native American jewelry and stuff like that. And I think my first week there, I thought there was something illegal going on because I didn't know that much money could be spent or doing. So I got a really tremendous backseat at a young age to that. I went on to start an internet marketing agency, which is just a fee for service. A company would pay me $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month to run their Google AdWords, their Facebook ads, or at that time SEO organic was big. I really built myself a job, which was fun. So I thought I was an entrepreneur. I was a solopreneur operator, and I was banging my head against the wall 60 hours a week and making a fun, good income. And eventually I got maxed out where I asked my brother if he wanted to come work for free, and he did. And then my other brother, and then friend, and then other best friend. So I built a really nice family business that was amazing. And then I had mentors along the way that I basically, said, hey, give me some feedback. And again, back to Ryan's comment, careful what you wish for. He said, okay. And as a guy I truly admire on not just spiritual level, but business wise. And he goes, you have a loser model. And I said, oh no. I said, loser model. And I remember I kind of stung for a second. I'm like, okay, tell me more, and he did. And he just said, you're trading time for money. And I productized the service from there. So instead of selling, $5,000 a month as an example to run your Google AdWords, I productized it. So I said, every time you got a new customer, you paid me then. I wore all that. I took on the rest of all the ad spend to my websites, delivered an inbound call or a form or a scheduled consult or something. That business scaled really, really rapidly, productizing it. People didn't care about who I was as much. They cared about dollars and cents, and did it make sense for them? And our first year in business, I think we did just under $1 million in EBITDA. Second year was 2.7 in net profit. Third year was 4.5. Fourth year was COVID. Again, it was basically almost a copy and paste of 19. So 4.5. And then 2021, we did 10.1 million in net profit, free cash flow. So never raised outside money, totally bootstrapped the business, had, I think 10, 11, 12 employees max, almost $1 million of profit per head. And then, as Ryan mentioned, we had ran a formal process with an investment banker, had a strategic acquisition to a public company. So we had a $70 million exit in April Fool's Day of 2022 is when it closed, funny enough. And yeah, that's it. Chased an earnout for a couple of years, and here I am. So happy to dive into any of that.
Oh, that's amazing. Our relationship started in July of 2021. And so April of 2022 is when it closed, and quite amazing timing. So everybody has an understanding, how much were you spending on media per month, let's say, in the company that you built to 10 million in EBITDA per year?
Yeah, so it was a little bit seasonal. So we'd have some months where we'd spend $5 million a month, and some closer to probably like 1.5, 2. But on average, it was about $3 million a month on paid media.
Got it. So $3 million to up to $5 million a month on paid media. And you said you had a team of how many people that were running the company?
Definitely less than 15. I think we maybe had somewhere between 10 and 12 of us that were running the company, all remote.
And just so everybody listening in, these are astronomical profit numbers on a per employee basis. Generally, you might be lucky to get $1 million in revenue per employee, let alone $1 million in profit per employee, or somewhere in that neighborhood. So that's just a testament to how efficient Anthony ran it. What were your management practices like running such levels of efficiency? Because you guys are spending big money, and there's a lot on the line, big risks. If something goes wrong, CPAs fluctuate. There's some pretty aggressive risk taking involved in the model that you built.
Yeah, I'll take you from, I think maybe some of the state-size companies here as well too. That I heard a lady mention, off on her own and wants to get out of the weeds. I think for me, I first offloaded things that I didn't like doing. And that was super easy, right? Whether that was bookkeeping, I didn't love that very much, or even hiring someone personally for laundry and food and things like that. And I used that, even though that's not really a business expense, that was net getting time back in my pocket. So that was relatively easy for me to start delegating that work. The next was a little bit harder, which was I've got these other things on my plate taking up on my full time. where's the highest value activity I should be spending my time on? And I consistently ask that question to myself. And for me, I realized it was really sales and client management. It wasn't actually fulfillment of the product, which in this case was running ads as an example. So I would bring someone on and I'd train them. And, at first it was sit next to me, let me show you how to do it. And then I said, okay, now you go and I'll watch. And then I gave them a leash and said, here you go to, now you have $5,000 worth of spend. After that, let's review. So I gave, whatever, set the dollar amounts to it. But I felt really good about that. Watch me, then I'll watch you. Then you have autonomy and I'm going to check in. And first time I check in every 3 days, then it's every week, then it's every 2 weeks, then it's every month. And then eventually as we got big enough, it might be every quarter. I mean, that's dramatic, but that would be where I guess it would start to go as the organization grew. So those are two really big principles that I employed very early on. As we got bigger, Ryan, to answer your question, I measure the heck out of everything. So I had, a software called Time Doctor, HubSpot, I think it's Hubstaff. Sorry, Hubstaff. Jeez, Hubstaff that would essentially track people's time on their computer. So I knew that if one of my employees, like it would take random screenshots throughout the day and things like that, I would track how many hours they almost clocked in and clocked out, which from a remote access level was super important for me to not just a compliancy perspective. And listen, I wasn't on a Saturday night looking at what they were doing on their screenshots, but it helped hold accountability for my team members that were overseas or live in a different state or work from home or something like that. So I measured that very well. I measured our in a real-time dashboard, our revenue, our profitability. And then for me, I had to watch the third metric, which was the quality of the leads coming in. So a lot of people in their marketing might focus on, how cheap did you get a call or how cheap did you get a lead, which is absolutely the wrong metric to focus on. It's really the ROI on the end. For me as a lead generation company, I wasn't selling a Medicare Advantage policy, but I was driving a call to United Healthcare who would sell a Medicare Advantage policy. So I had to watch their quality metrics. Otherwise, for a day or two, I would look like I'm making a ton of money and feel great. But then they'd come back and they'd say, hey, Anthony, I paid you $100,000 yesterday and I didn't make any money on that. I only made $80,000 in revenue. I need to drop your payout by 20% or I need to turn you off. So that's where most marketers and lead generators miss the boat, which is following all the way through to the actual end dollars, especially if you're not the one selling the product or you have a front end offer that ultimately leads to a higher back end offer, things like that.
Yeah. So was there any times where you got a call from a big client and they said, this is unacceptable and you panicked and had to problem solve? Is there, give us some of the dirt that happened? Because, you built this remarkable business. Where were some of the storms in the building of this business?
Yeah, so one of the storms I remember specifically, because it's one of the greatest lessons I had, was I had a employee over the weekend misspend about $30,000 on air, which was a lot of money then. That's a lot of money today, excuse me. But literally on nothing. No, there was no call center open. It was an accident. He left, campaign on and plugged in an extra zero for the weekend. Oops. So I had known he had done that. On Monday, I wanted to see if he would come tell me what happened, which he did. And I knew I had a choice at that time. I could either reprimand him and say, hey, you made a huge mistake, or I could treat him with compassion and know that it was an accident. And again, I'm not saying perpetually to make these mistakes. It's the fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me kind of things. It's okay to make mistakes. And I knew there was an opportunity cost around had I slapped his wrist. I don't know how many millions of dollars that would have cost me. He ended up going on to be my top media buyer I had, wow, managing tens of millions of dollars. And had I slapped his wrist at that point, I would have never been able to measure the amount of money and growth we would have lost because he would have been timid and scared to do things out of fear for getting in trouble. And versus I said, dude, that's awesome. And he literally said it. He goes, I was throwing up. He literally told me he threw up over the weekend. Yeah. He threw up. He was so scared to tell me. I go, no, dude. I want you to fail being aggressive all day over fail being passive. And he ran with that. And like I said, he ended up being my top media buyer. And so that was a great storm and a great lesson within there of how I could have handled that much differently and the result of handling that correctly. And then I get calls all the time from customers where it's like, hey, our quality's not quite there, or there's an issue. And it's really handling it like a strategic partner, right? Like if you're, and I employ everyone to do this with their customers, really their partners at the end of the day, and treating them and acting like that. Like I would say, you know what, let me wire you back, $200,000, just to make you more whole. Like who does that? A lead company doesn't do that. I was like, who? And so they'd stick with my payout, or they'd stay with how many calls or leads they wanted to buy, or whatever that looked like. Or we dig in and we'd say, wait, what is the real business issue here, business opportunity? What's going on? Why didn't that convert? Well, my top 20 sales reps went to Hawaii on a sales retreat. Okay, duh. Now we know why it didn't convert as well. So, but people wouldn't have those strategic conversations and really talk to them like a partner to understand where are the issues or what's going on in their business outside of what's just on the surface or what's on paper.
Yeah, and my observation in getting to know you and becoming friends with you through our experience together, first as a client and then as an investor and then as a friend, is you've always led with values. Everything that you've ever done is led with values, and obviously it pays tribute to the spiritual roots and to your parental roots, the way you were raised growing up. But when you were selling your company, sometimes it's one thing to have values in one state, and then you got partners and you have new people showing up to the table, and there's compromises that people will ask you to make to your values, or you might even contemplate them. So talk about that process of selling your company. How did that test you? How did it test your anxieties or your fears, or even have you question yourself in ways that you hadn't before?
Yeah, I believe God wants to see you exercise your faith when it's least convenient for you, right? And I think it's easy to be full of faith when you're printing money and you're moving and everything's good, and it's a lot harder when things are tough. And I think that's ultimately where for me at least, where God's saying, okay, let's see how faithful you are. Do you just go to church on Sundays, and are things just happy when they're good, or do you love me and have gratitude and pray to me when things are tough, right? And man, that sales process is such an emotional roller coaster, or it can be, because one day you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to sell the company, and then the other day, no chance, and then they switched out CFOs mid process, and then they raise rates, and then and like all these different things that really test your emotions and psyche. And I think for me, a couple things was really key. One is I really enjoyed my business. I really did. I was not burnt out. I was not tired. I was not ready to be done with it. I can see someone ready to be done with it. You would get worn down through that process and likely sell for a significant discount versus someone who said, "Hey, I've got stamina and I enjoy the heck out of this." I think timing is good here. So and I would have had no idea how good timing was in the universe of interest rates and things like that. Timing, as far as like my business on a roller coaster, this might be a good time to take some strategic chips off the table at my age and with what I'm doing. That's one. I would say as well. I think you have team members, and I remember telling like my bookkeeper, like, "Hey, we're in a formal process." Next day, it was not, "Can I get a raise?" It was, "Hey, my new hourly rate is $50 an hour," and from 30. And I was like, "Oh, this is weird."
You
Okay.
got a little shakedown
Yeah,
during the process.
exactly. And that was interesting. I'd say, when we did exit, I had a mentor say, and Ryan, I'm certain you reinforced this if not introduced it, but when I make money, everybody makes money. And he said, down to the guy managing comments on Facebook up. So I wrote a $25,000 check to several $1 million checks of
Yeah.
people that own zero equity in the company, had nothing on paper, but shoot, they deserved every single penny of that. And I remember the guiding light was, hey, do what feels good to you, because you're going to have some people that are going to love it and some people that are going to hate you, and it's never going to be enough for some people. And I remember I had best friends. One of my best friends, I handed him $1 million check. He looked at it like it was $5 and put it in his pocket. And that hurt.
Yeah.
And that hurt. And that was a lot of spiritual growth and emotional growth to step into his shoes, understand where he is and coming from on his journey. For me to stand strong, because I can also see people being like, "Oh, that's not enough. Okay, here's more." Like, I got to go back to my guiding light and said, "This is the number I felt was fair and then some, and the right thing to do." And then I had, of course, people that were crying and they said, "You changed my life, and this is incredible." So those are some, and I could go longer and all day, but those are
I
some.
remember having the conversations about each of these negotiations that we had and talking about doing what was right. And then I remember you made one person, and we won't mention names, a substantial sum of money. And it was a massive check, and he had very little involvement in the company. And, and everybody has a different opinion when you go to sell a company, basically.
And
Yeah.
I think it's a great lesson that we're all on our own journey. We're all on our own phase and time in life, and just treating situations and people with grace and yourself with grace. And it's just God's got a plan, and even if it doesn't, it doesn't appear to be the right one in the moment, it of course is the right one. So just again, exercising that faith and that trust
Yeah.
is just like, I don't know how people go through life, let alone business, with not having a strong faith.
Yeah.
I just I cannot believe it, because there's so many times where, given it to God, the weight has just saved my life in so many directions and allowed me to continue to grow and prosper and be able to do good for others, and good for team members, and support my customers and the people that end up being my leads and my team members and things like that. Like, it's just again, all by the grace of God. So anyway.
Yeah, now I remember we had a lot of contemplation because you weren't burnt out by your business. You had a ton of energy. And if I recall, you were only putting 15 hours a week or something like that into the business at the time. What was that? What was the actual number that you had to put into the business? Because you had it running very efficiently.
Yeah, I was definitely working on the business, not in the business. So I would work on the business, 30 hours a week, but I took trips for 3 weeks sometimes over in Asia, where I had backwards time zone, that I opened up my email in the middle of the night for maybe 30 minutes, and the business grew. And I guess I'll tell you a story on that. Like, I guess funny enough, Asia as well too. This is in 2014-ish, I think. I like just started my agency. I was just like the miss who spoke. It was like myself, and then I had like I think two team members or something like that. And I was working like a dog, 60 hours a week. Clients would call me on Saturday. What's going on with my ads? What's happening? And I had no boundaries. And all I knew was I'm going to over deliver for everyone, so they stayed as customers. And I knew this could not continue. I could not scale where I was the nucleus of everything. And I knew that I would get burnt out if I was working so many hours a week. So I booked a trip 3 months out to Thailand with a couple buddies, where I knew the time zone was reversed. I essentially burnt the ships and said, I better figure out how either two things are going to happen. I'm not going to sleep for a minute over there, or I'm going to have a business that operates on its own. And around that time, I was in a part of a group called EO Accelerator, and we had a speaker come in. So we have an all-day learning event. And he said, if you can't spend all day here learning, and you have to step outside for meetings and emails, you don't have a business. You create yourself a job.
Yeah.
And that hit me hard as I walked out of the room several times during that learning day. I was like, shoot, I created myself a job. I'm not a business owner. So yeah, that was a huge wake up call for me. I eventually, again, through some of that coaching and autonomy, allowed people to have the breathing room to really be entrepreneurs. I really thought everyone on my team was an entrepreneur. They were an entrepreneur within their department, and they had the ability to work completely autonomously. And of course, there were checks and balances. And of course, I was, a modern day, I joke, I'm like, towards the end of my business, I was a cheerleader, and I worked for them more than they worked for me. I would come in and say, what problems do we have? And then my job would be to go solve those with people, with processes, with consultants, with education, whatever that looked like. And that was really my job. So to answer your question, no, towards the end, I worked very little in the business. Like, I wasn't running any of the ads, I wasn't managing any of the customers day to day, but I'd still look to land, big strategic clients like a United Healthcare or Progressive or something like that. And then I would still help with the strategy of overall the messaging and the ads. So I was not 100% out of the business, but I certainly was not 100% in the business. And it was like a perfect level of where and how much I wanted to work, where I felt like it was highest value activity, adding a ton of value, loving the heck of what I was doing, and still having a self-generating operation, which I think comes back to your comment, Ryan. Like, why do people are like, oh, did you have amazing tech? No. Did you have amazing? No. What did you have? I had a great team, great processes, and a great P&L. And that's ultimately why they acquired me. Is that the guy made the joke. He said, Anthony, if you get hit by a bus, this thing doesn't stop. And I said, well, one, I hope I don't get hit by a bus, but two, that's when I believe you've built a sellable asset. When, if God forbid that were to happen, or you were to disappear, on a remote island, that's maybe a better example.
Yeah.
That the business still runs itself and grows
Now,
ultimately, not just sustains.
the reason why I asked that question is that's not an easy business to sell. It's generating $10 million a year in positive cash. You are not having to grind it out and work 80 hours a week. You can take vacations, you can travel, you can have the lifestyle of your dreams, and the business is going to continue growing. But you made the decision to sell. And I remember weighing this out and thinking you could continue to scale this, or the macro environment could change and things could go backwards. And so it's either all in on the future or you exit. and you made the choice to sell. And I remember talking about this, and you said, I made the decision to sell, I'm moving forward with the transaction. And then the marketplace changed and you made the right call. You got out at the top of the market, at least at that time. So what was that like for you to time it at the top of the market and to exit at that time? And then the second question is, how did life change after the exit, being that the macro environment changed shortly after?
I don't claim to have done anything smart. It's all God's grace on timing. I think we can put ourselves in good environments and educate, and I'll touch on those, but that is 1000% God's grace on timing. That I did not do anything extraordinary there by any means. I'll be the first to say that. I think some steps I did to put myself in a good position was, again, not working in the business, on the business. I'm a marketing agency. I was going to Medicare conferences because that was my ultimate customer. So I had time to study and learn the environment. And through that learning, I learned that they were buying customers on a 5-year lifetime value. I also learned that seniors at that time, and this will be very specific to my business, but we'll bring it back to apply. Seniors before that, 90% of enrollments were a handshake deal in their kitchen with their agent. COVID came, a senior did not want a agent in their kitchen during lockdown. So what did they do? They started shopping online. Amazing for my business. Went like that. But I also knew, as being a marketer, that a shopper is a shopper is a shopper. Meaning, if you start shopping, it means you start shopping, which means you're going to churn faster, very highly likely. So they were still buying on handshake deal lifetime values when it was a Facebook ad lifetime value where they're getting 4 Medicare ads per day outside of mine, highly likely, and TV and this and that. So ultimately what ends up happening is I end up selling, and the lifetime values start coming out. Oh, no, they're only 3 years. Oh, they're 2 years. Oh, they're a year and a half. So they were, grossly overpaying me for what they were projecting the lifetime value of the customers. I only had that insight because I was not the one running ads. I was not the one on the call with my customers every second. I was able to study my space. I think that's really, really important. And even if you're, the CPA, not only what's just changing in the environment, what's changing internationally, what's changing for my customers. Do I just have a niche? Am I just working with manufacturers? What's going on? How do I go to manufacturing conferences, right? And just to learn, not even to get new business, like that's the level of directness that when you're able to work on the business, you're able to do that. And so many other things. I can't even claim to say I studied, economics to know that interest rates were going to rise, which would have obviously affected my business wholeheartedly. So to answer your question, that was the hours on it. The decision, I still have a little selfie video of myself thanking myself for letting my pride down and taking the deal, which in hindsight, how silly is that? That was like the best decision I made. But it was like that pull at the time. And I would have never known, again, interest rates, or I had an idea on my hunch on the shopper as a shopper. Of course, how I just articulated it made it sound like I had a crystal ball and saw that coming a year earlier. Like, absolutely not. I just kind of had a feeling that was coming. But why I ultimately sold, one is I thought it was prudent to take chips off the table. I looked at my investment portfolio as a whole, where I had a $70 million business and maybe, I'm going to make up a round number, $5 million in between cash and equities. And I was like, oops, I am over concentrated. Just like, no good investor would say, buy 90% of Apple stock in your entire portfolio, a broadly diversified portfolio. Us as business owners have a very heavily concentrated portfolio. So I thought that was prudent to take the cash off the table to diversify. That was number one. Number two, the details are where everything is. So for me, I had a very narrow non-compete, meaning I couldn't do insurance marketing. I'm not an expert in insurance marketing. I self-proclaim a pretty good marketer. So for me, it was like, okay, I can take chips off the table. I have a 4-year non-compete in insurance marketing, but I can go market anything else really outside of this. It's not telling me I'm not strong-armed from, stepping outside of my home. So I said, if I wanted to go actively earn and grow in another business like that, I absolutely could. And funny enough, Ryan, you mentioned stuff that I'm sure you were saying in my ear that was, not going out the other ear, but I didn't really hit with me on some of the macro changes that could happen in my space. Like, again, I made it sound like I had a crystal ball a year earlier, but like, I was like, okay, yeah, no, things could change, but that's really hard to say. Yeah, you're right. When you're growing like this, like crazy, it's like, what could change? Everything's going great right now. And I think surrounding yourself with mature mentors and peers and people that have been there and done that was unbelievably crucial for me to say, hey kid, like, yes, you're crushing it, but there might be a day where this isn't going through the moon. Like, let's look at it from that perspective. And that was super helpful for me to look at it put that lens on and look at it from there.
Yeah, I recall having those conversations with you. And then the last questions I want to talk about are around post-exit and what I've affectionately called post-exit syndrome, where we have this dream to get a big exit, especially to a publicly traded company. We're going to ring the bell, we're going to celebrate the news, and then life changes. And all of a sudden we have a tremendous amount of wealth and we have to start to allocate our capital, and we're worried about people taking money from us or losing money or everybody wants a part of our money. People are pitching us on investing on this, and life changes. So how did life change for you after the exit? So entrepreneurs here can hear some insight as to what's in store for them when they one day exit their business.
Yeah, Ryan, everything you just said there, that nobody feels bad for you for those problems when you exit, which nor should they really. But the problems are relative, right? So I'm certain I thought that way prior to exit, but no, they're real problems to navigate, and they're real opportunities and to navigate through. And I'd say, let's see how to tackle this. One, I was very income, rich and asset okay. I became very asset rich and income okay, and that was like huge mental shift, which is funny because I'm sure a lot of us in our business, let's just say you have a business doing $200,000 in net profit in your pocket, right? And you live off that and you go spending all this stuff, and you had a $200,000 business. Let's say you sold it at 5x. Oops, wow, nice. I just got $1 million check. Well, two opportunities there. One is you don't have $200,000 coming in anymore. You probably still have your, $80,000-$100,000 lifestyle, if you were living below your means. You're like, okay, well, I got to figure out how to pay from that. So I start chipping away at the principal. And then you also have this very blessed opportunity of deploying capital. So now you've been given this capital, and now you need to go from being a great business operator to to a good, to a great investor, which is a totally unique skill set. It's no different skill set, excuse me. It's no different than being, the baker who then owns a bakery, who then is the visionary that has a brand that licenses it. You know what I mean? Like those are all different skill sets along the way, and this is another step on that I had not foreseen, which was again the becoming learning the skill set of being a great investor. So I kind of cheated a bit because I got a 2-year earnout, so I got paid relatively well to still do what I was doing, but kind of not really. Like I remember the buyer, like I was like, "What do you want me to do? I don't work in the business." He's like, "You're an insurance policy. You're so that your team doesn't leave." I was like, "Okay." So I'd show up a couple hours a day of Zoom calls and get paid well, and that was awesome. And of course, but so I could still in my head kind of lie to myself and be like, "Well, you still got this thing." While also like, it's okay, you'll figure it out. But eventually the music stops and you're like, okay, got it. What am I going to do with my life? And for me, I filled it with stuff. And I don't mean that how you would think, not substances, not materials, with work. You can ask my wife, I got more busy than prior to selling the business. And if you ask me what I was working on, I 19 different things. I don't know. And it was just like, and I think it's Ernest Hemingway says it takes more courage to stare at a blank piece of paper than it does to get in the ring with a lion. And I felt that heavily firsthand. To stare at a blank piece of paper is one of the scariest things I've ever done, for sure. And it's if you do it right, and I think it's still in the process. We're all in the process of this post exit too. I don't think that goes away, or just in life, excuse me, when you're reinventing yourself. But it's you do it right, you get closer to your faith, you get closer to your health, you get closer to your partner. You start getting to solve higher level problems and work with. I think I saw Charlie Munger say wealth is being able to not needing people so that you can work with the people you want to, or some version of that. And I've really enjoyed those experiences. And I'll say, just because I made the comment that could have been taken wrongly with I think I said filled with stuff. I went backwards, which again is not necessarily the preferred right or wrong method. It might get a little praised on this call, but I spent less post-exit than I did pre-exit. Like I cut my expenses.
You actually started selling assets. You got rid of the luxury cars. I watched you quit buying the most expensive meal on the menu at dinner. You actually went to a place of scarcity after the exit.
Correct. And I think some of that was healthy and or might get artificially wrongfully probably praised a bit because you're like, wow, you sold, made a ton of money, and then you spent less, and you downgrade your life, which is awesome. It's better than the other way, I would certainly say. But a portion of that, a strong portion, and it dwindled down over the years, was out of scarcity. It was like exactly that 200,000 income coming I made to $1 million, cash you got paid for the business. So yeah, that was where was I going with that? Oh no, I've always really enjoyed living far below my means. And I think that allows you to not have back to the $200,000 income person. If they're spending 180, whoops, we got a problem because we still got taxes. If you're spending 100 or 120 or 130, 140, you're really running it hot. And I think I had always stayed far below that. And that allowed me to just come from such a place of abundance. I mean, last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it back over, was during COVID, we didn't touch on, half my business disappeared. So I had $20 million in revenue, about 4.5 of EBITDA, like I said, in 19, about 10 and 2, 10 revenue and 2 EBITDA disappeared overnight. And the reason for it was they were buying customers again on a 36-month lifetime value. They were smart enough in that space to say, whoops, I better retain these people versus go acquire new customers. So died overnight. And at that point, I remember Steve Wynn had a great case study during the 08 recession. Every other hotel started laying people off and retracting. And he called in everyone in the company and his top managers, and he gave away 20 cars to the top managers. And not everyone got a car, but he sent a message and he said, we are going to grow during this time period. We are not going to retract. Your job is safe. We are here to thrive. And wow, when everybody else is pulling back. So I remember hearing that, and as scary as it was, I got my whole team on the call and I said, hey, your jobs are safe. I will dip into my savings. I will do whatever it takes. I'm going to need you to hunker down. We're going to do whatever it takes to get here. And ultimately, we started running ads in Medicare, and that's what got acquired. Not the other stuff. The other stuff went away. The $10 million in profit was in Medicare. That was birthed out of that low moment, that low point where you get to exercise faith and really be a leader and strength. And of course, it sounds easy on the other side, but in the middle of it, you're like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. And so I forgot how I got on that tangent. But anyway,
it's great. Last question. You told me you're at an investor conference and you were asked a question. You said that the woman at the conference had posed a question to you that was profound and that you wrote something down and it was transformational to you. And I'd love you to share with the audience what that was.
Yeah, let me get it word for word. Give me 10 seconds because I said it to you earlier, Ryan. I didn't have it word for word, but I think it's that powerful. It is. If money, status, and external success was no longer the measure of worth, who would you be and what would you do? And I thought for me, I was just like, what a simple question. I think that's some of the right? Like some of the best coaching is like, oh, all this stuff going on. You go, what do you want? And you go, I don't know. And you're like, well, let's work on that, And it's like the simplest question can be the most profound. Like, what a profound question. If things and stuff and all this stuff that society kind of, yeah, I will repeat that, Sherry. It said, if money, status, and external success was no longer the measure of worth, who would you be and what would you want? And again, just thought it was the simplest question and just the most profound and just what a thought process to have everybody, kind of think through. Because ultimately, that's what we should be doing, right?
And what did you come up with?
Within about a millisecond, I wrote teach/coach. And started getting teary-eyed just like I am right now. And it was just like such a direct, clear sign from God as far as what I should be working on and what I should be doing. I hope everybody experiences a similar moment when they spend some time reflecting on that question.
Now you're making me tear up, Anthony. And immediately he reached out to me and he said, let's do this. Let's start building AlterCall together. As I mentioned, he's an investor. He came in a very important time, a private client, and I learned from him tremendous. There's so much value that he's offered to my life and a lot of the frameworks and things that he's taught me. And so I was learning from him as I was teaching him. And now he's officially joining us and helping coach some of our clients at AlterCall. And you'll be hearing more from Anthony and you'll be seeing more from Anthony as he participates further in our community here. Amazing. Well, welcome to the AlterCall family, Anthony. We have a little bit of time for some questions. Why don't we take a couple questions from the audience?
Thank you, Ryan. Anthony, first of all, thank you, man. I mean, it's really inspiring. God bless you. You're a true inspirational story.
Thanks, brother.
It's amazing. Like I was getting teary. I cry for everything.
So do I. I'm such a baby.
Good. So Anthony, we're currently, invest in about $5,000 in meta ads. I have a young team, very, very strong. You tell them learn about this, and they go and they try to learn it. And with that $5,000, we're generating about $95,000 in return, and 50,000 of
Nice.
that it's about net profit. But I want to scale it with confidence, and my team doesn't have that confidence yet. And I don't think I have strong resources to say, look, now learn about TikTok or Google or take it to the next step. And
Yeah.
I would love to know, courses, conferences, mentors, even including you or whoever that can tell us this is how you now replicate what you're doing, or this is how the approach that needs to be to bring that from from 100,000 to $1 million in sales.
Yeah.
I want to 10x that.
Amazing. First off, brother, awesome return. Shortest answer, go ahead and spend another $5,000. I think we're all safe to agree on you doing that. But all jokes aside, there's within Facebook, there's literally, it's called Facebook Ad Buyers Group. I would definitely have your team and you become a member of that. These are all real time, like people that really have their ear to the ground. So going to learn a ton through that. There's a course called Ad Skills. It's like $200 or $300, something like that, worth every freaking penny of it. Those guys are phenomenal marketers and teachers, more importantly. I think the biggest challenge is what you alluded to. There's a lot of teachers out there and not people that have done it, and these guys have. So I'm a huge fan of them. I'm more than happy to be a resource for you as well too, as you're going. Truly, that'd be a blessing for me. I always loved hiring and working with. I don't know your business. I did not have an e-commerce business. But e-commerce people it's literally called Facebook Ad Buyers Group, Marcia. Like Facebook.com and then type in Facebook Ad Buyers Group. I know it's super confusing with Facebook. But e-commerce people are used to buying on a target performance media on a cost per acquisition, because if we're selling coffee cups and it's $3 coffee cup and they go, hey, we brought you a sale at $10, you're like, we're upside down. What the heck? Whereas like a lot of service businesses or lead generation type businesses, there's a lot of opaqueness as far as like people don't like, oh, we drove a lead at $5. Cool. Can you get it down to $3? Yeah, I did. Like, but meanwhile, like they spent $2,000 to make $1,000 sale, but they didn't see that attribution until further down the funnel, or they're getting referrals or organic, and they're like, we're making money, but meanwhile, this is losing money. So and then you've got, of course, branding people that are like, let's spend so on, we're on billboards in the Super Bowl. And it's like, okay, definitely don't want those people, especially at this stage of the business. One day, maybe when we're Coca-Cola or something. But so for me, like as far as who I'm hiring and working with, it's usually people with an e-commerce background. Certainly, like you just mentioned, people that are hungry. This stuff changes so fast and moves so quickly that's important. And then lastly, and this is going to sound so simple and so off the beaten path, I myself as a business owner and as a marketer and as a team marketer would be reading psychology books. That is like, you want to talk about the best marketing books? It's anything having to do with psychology. The only reason I'm a good marketer is because I know how to get the right message in front of the right person at the right time. The rest of the stuff is trinkets. Like I haven't launched an ad in 10 years in the account, but I think I'm a phenomenal marketer because I can understand the demographic, what message makes them tick. I can understand through audiences and through these different tools, how to get in front of that person at the right time and place. That's really it. So I would have your team just studying psychology and then studying my customer. So like I used to literally go to assisted living homes and meet with seniors and literally just volunteer, hang out with them. One, it felt good. Two, I was getting a market research study for my Medicare business. So, and I remember before that, I don't recommend this at all. I ran credit card debt settlement ads, and I was like, I'll be like a method actor. If anybody knows what that term is, it's like where you're like literally become. So I defaulted on one of my medical bills to see what getting collection agencies calling me and mail and letters in the mail felt like. Again, I don't recommend that, but I did do that literally. So I felt like I remember like feeling like I didn't want to like look at my phone, and I was like, whoa! Like in the morning, I didn't want to go on my phone. I was like, I thought like a debt collector was going to call me again, and I was like, wow, like that's a positive message. So everyone else is going, see what your interest rate is. I'm like tired of not looking at your phone, and people are like, yes. So understanding so let me refresh that all. Ad skills, Facebook ad course. I'm more than happy to be a resource again for anybody on the call. It'd be my honor and privilege. I'd love to for hiring e-commerce people. And then the two things that really are not anything groundbreaking, but reading psychology books and spending a lot of time with your customers. On Fridays, I used to block out an hour randomly calling my customers and just having a conversation. Hi, I'm a customer service rep. I just want to hear how everything's going. Where are you? Who are you in life? What's going on? Last thing I'll say, I know I'm going off with this, but I think it's a good lesson for everyone, is I remember this one lady, and it fits into our community here. She kept going, thank God, thank God, thank God, thank God, thank God. Interesting. And I said, are you religious? Yes. So then I started digging deeper and digging deeper. I started reading, like, in the Bible, it's written, slave to our creditors and being in debt, and for my debt settlement company. And I actually partnered with Hillsong, which is had multi-million likes on their Facebook page, and I ran ads from their page saying, we help Christians get out of debt. I would have never had that insight if I did not spend time with my customer. And I was able to, have a really niche message to the right people that matched my demographic. I would have never known that if I didn't spend an hour every Friday calling my customers, pretending to be a customer service rep. So anyway, that was a bit of a tangent, probably more than you bargained for, but reach out to me, anything I can help with.
Yeah, I will. And this is amazing. The guy that did this result for me is an e-commerce guy.
Oh, I love it. Good.
Right on the
Nice.
spot. And I just right now I need to hire another e-commerce guy, which is
I love it.
Thank you so much,
I love
bro.
it, Nelson. Of course, brother. Much love, dude.
Yeah.